All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Money Matters. My name is Mathura and I'll be your host for today. If you guys are new to Money Matters, welcome to the show, welcome to the family. Money Matters is a talk show that we have been running since the pandemic, so 2020, where we discuss all kinds of stories, anything and everything with regards to money. I think money is something that encompasses all areas of our lives, and all of us will somehow have some really funny or weird or interesting experiences when it comes to money. And we just want this to be a space for all of us to share our stories, to learn from each other, and of course, improve on our personal finance management and even business finance management as well. So, we have had amazing speakers who come in each episode and they share their experiences, and I'm mind blown every single time. Also, we have had some sessions where we do Q&A with the audiences. You guys submit in your questions and we go through them one by one, and it has been a true pleasure hosting all of this. I think this is episode 73, so I'm very, very excited for today. So without talking too much, if you're already a recurring viewer, you've already watched our previous sessions, you know how this works. We're going to have some amazing guest speakers who come on board to share their experiences. And I think I am personally very excited for today's episode because the two guest speakers that we have for today are two young people who have done amazing things. You guys know, because in Ascendance, we love meeting youngsters who are creating change in their unique way. And these two speakers are no different. They have done so much and they have the potential to do so much more. And I'm just very, very excited and honored to have them on our show. So without further ado, let me present the founders and the CEOs of Jalan Journey. I'll let them share a little bit more about Jalan Journey, but the founders and CEO, Harrison and Sri. Let me welcome them on screen.
Hi everyone.
Hi guys.
Hi guys. Hi everyone.
How are you guys feeling?
Feeling good, definitely. I'm currently in the US, so a bit of time difference, but nothing I can't beat. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm based in Singapore, so no difference for me. But yeah, I'm just chilling. All good.
I think this is my first episode where I've had speakers from 3 different countries tuning in at the same time. So thank you for letting me, unlock a milestone.
Great.
And I mean, I gave a very, very brief intro. I did not dive in that much deeper because I think both of you, whenever I go back into your backstories, it's such an interesting story that I love listening to you guys talk about it, especially when it comes to like how you guys met and how you even decided to set up something called Jalan Journey. Because I think there's many people who go to school, and there's many students who go to school. They may have seen things that they feel can be done better, or they feel like, I should probably do something in this area. But how often does that actually translate to something that takes place, like an actual business that runs? That is very, very rare. I think most people stop at ideas. Executions never really takes place as often. And I think what was amazing about the both of you is that you had that idea and you actually made it happen, and you have a huge team behind you as well, who's kind of working together with you to do this. So maybe a little bit about both of your respective backgrounds and then how both of you come together to kind of set up Jalan Journey in a way.
Yeah. So what happened was that, Sri and I have known each other for a pretty long time. It's been almost 8 years. We met back in secondary school, so high school, back in when we were secondary 1, which is around 13 years old. We are from the same school, Anglo-Chinese School Independent. Then what happened was that both Sri and I actually met while we were playing softball. So it was actually a school CCA. And after that, Sri actually took a leave, sort of, to go to India to study between 15 and 16. But when he came back, it turned out that, hey, he actually ended up in the same class as me back in my 17 and 18-year-old school.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting. And then he joined back the CCA we met in, and then we've been tight ever since. So after that, that's how we started, actually. We met each other in Sec 1. But what happened was that when COVID-19 struck, right, the pandemic closed everything down, we're like, hey, let's go and do something. So that's when we started this ground-up youth initiative called Comm.UnitySG. And it was a really, really inspiring and meaningful thing we did. And from there, we would actually aim to seek and help sort of galvanize the student population in Singapore to help volunteer for the homeless and displaced community in Singapore. And that, of course, took off. And maybe I'll let Sri explain how that led to Jalan Journey eventually.
Yeah, of course. So, like Harrison said, we were doing a lot of things on the ground, and as a result of the things that we were doing, people really wanted to hear our story and see how we actually were able to create such an impact in our young age. For context, during the pandemic years, we started out Comm.UnitySG with the aim of raising $5,000, and we ended up raising over $125,000. So the scale in which we were able to achieve an impact was rather honestly, it was quite crazy for us at that point as well. But we did do it. And so a lot of students were very interested in learning more. And because we were championing the cause of homelessness, which is something that there's not a whole lot of awareness of as well, really there was a lot of opportunities for us to share with people and so on. And so one such opportunity was with Singapore Polytechnic institution here, where we were able to run a program by talking to students, but instead of just talking to them, we were actually in a virtual world where they were immersed, and then we went through the entire experience. And when we did that, we were like, hey, actually, this is really exciting. You can just go into a virtual world, and instead of us just telling you in a top-down manner, just you sit there in a Zoom call, I sit here, and so on. We put them in experience, let them experience firsthand what's the difficulties and so on. So we thought this was a great opportunity, and this should be promulgated to everybody. And in this sense, we decided to go specifically into the education of values in Singapore. And we started doing more research and seeing what's the best way we can actually deliver this knowledge. And it really was a happy union, because then we realized that, gamification is the way to go forward. Because if I was just tell a student, I think all the students watching will be able to relate as well. If I would just tell them, sit down in a classroom and I tell them, okay, so this is what's happening in the community and so on. Chances are you're probably going to be bored, probably not going to be listening and so on. And it's totally understandable. But you look at it from the teacher's perspective, it's very hard for them to be innovating and changing things constantly for every single lesson as well. There's only so much they can do, and they also focus on their own classes. So in this situation, you can't really blame anyone. So what we can have is a solution where someone else comes in and provides something better. And that's what Jalan Journey is all about. So we come in and we say that we can provide better, more immersive, more entertaining values education lessons. And in this way, everyone is able to benefit. Students get a more engaging lesson. Teachers are able to relax a bit more because they hand over the responsibilities to us. And we are able to create a great social impact by impacting many different lives and improving their knowledge and enrich them about all the different trials and tribulations that various vulnerable groups experience. So this has really been the journey for us. It's been very organic, but it's been a very simple path of finding a problem and solving it and making it sustainable.
Yep. I mean, the amount of growth that has taken place in a very short period of time, that is amazing. And I think one of the things that I really liked about it is you guys also mentioned that you kind of got started with I think it's Comm.SG Unity, right? During the pandemic time as well.
That's right.
And seems like the pandemic has changed many people's lives. And about that, right? So like a lot of people were rethinking their outlook on life. They were rethinking why they do certain things during the pandemic. I think many of us were like, am I doing what I want to be doing, or am I just doing things for the sake of doing it? Mm-hmm. And many of us got started on projects that we have always wanted to but never had the time to. Like even Money Matters, I think it came out of the boredom that existed during during the pandemic. But for it to continue on, because there were many people who started amazing things during the pandemic, and then it ended the moment things went back to so-called normal. But you guys were able to kind of like evolve that and pivot that into something else and keep it going. So what do you feel was different with regards to both of your experiences that kind of helped you to ensure that you do continue and not stop at one point and just go for the typical pathway that you will have?
I think maybe I could speak for both Shri and I. Shri, definitely chime in if you think otherwise, but I believe that the work that you're doing definitely has an impact on how far you're going to go and like how much motivation you have, right? If it's just something that is, plain for business, something that you are not passionate about, right? It can't bring you really that far. But what really drives the both of us is social entrepreneurship, right? Combining both the entrepreneurship and the social causes aspect of things. And definitely having that intersection is great because you know that everything you do has meaning, right? So what we're doing at Jalan Journey, right, is essentially bringing social causes into a virtual space to teach students. So you have actually people, right, that are benefiting, because ultimately the students that go through our program, they develop empathy, and then they go and volunteer, and they influences their spheres of community, right? So we feel that there is definitely a lot of impact and meaning behind it. Every time there are dry periods, definitely there'll be periods where you'll be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm done. I hit a roadblock, right? But you always have to go back to the point, like, what is this all for, right? And we found that motivation in the people, right? Really who we're impacting and the meaning behind everything. So I think that's a really big driving factor for both of us to make sure we keep going, be like, this week's been a tough week, but we still got to get the work done, because, ultimately people are benefiting from it. So I think that's something great as well. Shri, let me know if you have any thoughts as well. Yeah. I think you're muted, Shri. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, thanks. So I think that's excellent. The fact that you're able to push through the tough times, it helps. It also helps as two of us, so you can help keep each other in check. So if one person's a bit down, the other person's able to motivate them and talk to them and so on. So that helps as well. And in a more pragmatic sense, I think one thing that's really when you really reflect back, Harrison, I think you'll agree as well, is that it's helped that at every single step we try and be as targeted as possible, and really focus on creating impact on the specific outcome that we desire. So it's very easy to just say, I want to change the world, and then you try and solve all the problems at the same time. But when you try and do that, because of the number of resources that you have, it tends to become a situation where you're doing everything but you're also doing nothing, because you're doing a little bit of everything but you're not really pushing any frontiers. So at the early stage of the pandemic, both of us were inspired in different ways. For me, it's the fact that as Harrison mentioned, I was in India for a couple of years, and in Singapore, I think we are blessed enough to, have a very good environment and all that. But then it's not exactly the same when you go overseas, and then you really see firsthand what inequality looks like and all that. So then I was really, that's when I think the transition happened, where I was just like a boy who'd like to just play video games and watch movies, to someone who wanted to create a bit more of a social impact and see what I can do with my abilities. So then the pandemic came up, and we went on the ground. We actually went to talk to different vulnerable groups and asked them how they're doing, how they're coping. And that's when we actually serendipitously met a homeless man, and we went through the encounter. Then we were like, okay, you know what? This vulnerable group probably needs more attention than anyone else, because during the pandemic, that's when everyone was cooped up in their house. That means the homeless who don't have a home, they're going to be even more invisible. So then we targeted this vulnerable group. We focused on it. We championed their cause. We went around publicizing all of that. And because of the fact that we were so targeted, we were able to deliver a lot of information, convince a lot of stakeholders to, part with their time, their money, and so on. And similarly, when it comes to Jalan Journey again, when we trying to formulate how we're going to go about doing things, it really helped that we remain focused on values education. And on a business point of view, there have been a lot of people who told us, maybe use this as an entry point, pivot into teaching maths and science and all that. But if let's say we go into teaching maths and science, again, it's just like yet another edutech company. In terms of the social entrepreneurship, are you targeted? Not really. And will we have the same impact because you're competing with big companies who are who have a lot more resources? Then again, the answer would be quite apparent. So being targeted in focusing on what we want to achieve, and then putting all our resources towards that in particular, I think it's really helped us in being able to achieve significant impact in a shorter period of time.
Wow. I like the fact that it's not just like, hey, we want to go around and help people. It's also seeing that I want to help people. How do I get it done to the best of abilities in a way?
Yeah.
And since you guys brought that up, Jalan Journey is a social enterprise, and I'm one of those people who go like, every enterprise should be a social enterprise, and we should all work towards making the world a better place. But I don't think that's how the world operates at this point in time. Not yet, at least. And even for people who venture into social enterprises, I think one of the struggles that they would face is seeing that you may be the kind of person who's more inclined towards business, and then you may struggle with the balance of the social cause and the business, or you may be the one who's very inclined to the cause itself and may struggle with the business aspects of it. And I think most social entrepreneurs are the ones who would be all on for the cause, and then they're struggling with the business element of it. Is that something that you guys face, that balancing of both of these elements of your business in a way?
I think definitely we're both very passionate about social causes, so that's for sure. I think that gave us some form of alignment, because ultimately when you have two sort of conflicting ideas, right, you need to meet common ground and compromise. And what always brings us back is like, we're always thinking like, okay, what should we price the product at? What should we be doing? We always come to a consensus, like at the end of the day, it's the impact that we care about, right? So if it's the impact, what we care about, then how are we going to then formulate a strategy that best achieves that goal? So in terms of like how we reach that eventual like equilibrium, as I would call it, it's definitely a lot of like trial and error. We definitely made a lot of mistakes, but I think learning from our failures and building on the successes, we sort of arrived at what we saw fit. And I think that's the greatest milestone and greatest outlook to have. Never sort of be afraid of failure, because I think through failure you can either learn, right, or you succeed at something, and of course you apply that same formula again. I think on the business side of things, we both weren't very sure, and that's where we always thought of seeking help. Right, people are always more than willing to give advice. You just need to be willing to ask. So whenever we were proactive, whenever we had the opportunity, we went around asking, and that's the entire point of this talk show as well, right? Is learning from the experiences of others, because people love to share about what they've done, what they're passionate about, but you just need to be willing to learn as well. And so that's where we sort of picked up those like business acumen, our strategies, sort of learning from other people, and then of course applying it and seeing what sticks. Yeah, Shri?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything. I think just one big concern that we always had with regards to this exact tension between social impact versus the business aspect of things is less internal, because internally we are quite clear on what we want to achieve, and we know what our end goal is and what's our enabler, which is the cash flow. It is in the end of the day quite important, and internally we manage this very well. I would say the struggles really come when you're talking about communication with external stakeholders, because at the end of the day, these stakeholders are very important to us in terms of the impact you create, the kind of funding, the source, the resources you get, so that you can go and continue making your impact. But when you talk about communication to them, that's when this tension becomes very pertinent, because there might be, you don't know what they are aligned on, whether they are focused more on the social impact or whether they are focused on the business side of things. And if they want you to prioritize which, like, let's say they want you to prioritize the money, they want you to prioritize social impact. So when they give you money, what's the expectations and so on? So that's when it gets a bit harder to manage. And you really need to be very careful in this sense, in terms of what you promise and how you communicate what you're going to be doing with, let's say, funds and so on. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. But like what Harrison said is very true. You need not just rely on yourself. There's a lot of things that's going to help you with these decisions. Of course, there's some difficulties when it comes to social enterprise. For example, you would like to be very data driven, but let's say you're talking about attaining your equilibrium in your market. Sometimes you're just not able to do it because you're also trying to have a social impact, and that inherently does not allow you to achieve the same equilibrium. So that means maybe even though I'm priced lower than what the market rate is, I'll maintain it at that because of the fact that I want it to be accessible to schools. And so sometimes when you're talking about basic economics, you're losing out on this price signaling aspect. But on the converse point, when it comes to stakeholder management and all that, when they ask you to justify certain pricing and all that, it's not always a situation where you have to sacrifice one or the other. One example that when I was talking to one of the mentors recently, he told me, you look at Tesla, they are doing electric cars and all that, and adoption of electric vehicles is, in the end of the long run, is going to be impactful in reducing greenhouse emissions and so on, because it's a more efficient use of energy as compared to just burning fuels and combustion engines. But they don't go around saying this. They just say, I have a really cool car, you should buy it. That's their only value proposition they have. And that's how you can be a social enterprise, by not necessarily having to harp on your social impact all the time. It can be in terms of your business practices, in terms of what you advocate for, but it does not have to be very in your face and directly to the consumer. So there are different models to dealing with this tension. And it's really quite a unique thing that it would be very dependent on every enterprise, how they actually handle this particular thing.
Yeah. I mean, I like what the example you shared as well, because we may see the other end of people promoting their social cause more, but there's also people who don't necessarily do it, but that's one of the many ways you can choose to manage this in a way.
Right.
So this is a talk show about money, and as much as we talk about business, I like to talk about people's money, as weird as that sounds. So I'm just curious, like, because you guys got into volunteering and entrepreneurship and and all of that at a much younger age. Do you feel that these experiences has kind of changed your outlook with regards to money, compared to your peers in a way?
I can say that. Oh, Harrison, you want to go first?
Oh, go ahead first. I'm
Go
still
ahead.
thinking.
Yeah. I can say that honestly, to put it very frankly, the environment that both of us grew up in is somewhat more sheltered or a bit more protected in what you're able to witness outside and so on. So when you actually go down to the ground and you see what's the harsh reality that people face, a lot of times what you realize is amongst your peers, some of them just they don't believe the stories that you say, because for them that's just not the world they live in, even though it might be the exact same country, the exact same city. And so going through these experiences early on really helps in shaping a perspective about what the wider community is like, and what everyone has and what everyone doesn't have. Because in the end of the day, this is something that we have in our world as well. Inequality is going to be there everywhere. It's about how you acknowledge it and how you deal with it and so on. So for me personally, one tension I like I mentioned earlier, I was just playing video games, watching movies, all that, having a lot of fun. But then that's when you go out and then you really see inequality as it is. You go volunteer, you go talk to them, hear their stories, and realize that it's not always their fault. Sometimes it's just life turns out wrong badly for them, and then they go through certain experiences. But the fact is that they're pushing on. So that's something that's very inspiring. That's when you realize that you're lucky to be where you are, and then you're lucky to have the resources that you have. You're lucky to have the abilities that you have. And for me personally, I don't want to speak for everybody. That's when I had a moment of epiphany where I realized I shouldn't be. I have these gifts, I have these abilities. It might be almost wrong of me to be able to just use these benefits for myself. And one way you can kind of close the gap is to use these abilities to help those who need it more, and so on. So you make use of your privileges, and then you close the gap by making a difference for others. And so this is how I dealt with the entire tension. That's something that's actually driven me to continue having a social impact.
I think for me it's slightly different as well. What my mom always told me was like, growing up, I know it's a very Asian mindset. I've had some friends as well. I mean, it doesn't apply to everyone, but when you see someone on the street, right, who's in a position of lesser privilege, right, some parents may go like, oh, you need to study hard so that you don't end up like that person. But my mother always raised me on the aspect of saying like, you need to study hard so that you can be put in a position of privilege eventually and help people like those who are not in a privileged position. And so I think when we were volunteering on the ground with Comm.UnitySG, it was something that I saw firsthand, right? Those people of a lesser privilege or in lesser positions of society. And that really woke me up. It's sort of like a wake-up call to say like, hey, I have the opportunities where I'm at right now in terms of education, in terms of the people I've met, right, to really make a good social change. And of course, you can't do a lot of things without money. Money is important. Money does matter essentially, because ultimately you need money to achieve certain things, right? For example, if you want to go out and volunteer, who's going to be buying the paint if you're going to paint a homeless shelter? Who's going to be buying the food to distribute, right? So it does matter, but the ultimate goal behind it is who is the benefactors of that money, right? So to me, I don't really believe that money is the end all and be all. It's like sort of a means. And in that sense, right, money is serving, is not, you essentially are not living for money. Money is something that you use to live, right? So I would say that when I see money now, it's more so of like, how can I use that to really impact the people around me, and how I can save money as well in my own life so that I can channel it to effective social causes as well. So I think that's sort of how my perception of money has changed over time. Of course, I acknowledge that it is from a position of privilege that I'm able to say this, because I mean, for other people as well in other cases, definitely it may have more dire consequences as well. Yeah, so I want to be able to speak for everyone as well. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I think experiencing entrepreneurship and volunteering and all of that, one, yes, it opens up your mind to, there's always someone who has lesser than you or is in a worse position than you. I don't know how this works, but there is somehow always someone who's doing worse off than you. And it kind of grounds you back to like, hey, you actually have some things going for you and you need to focus on what you have. And I think with regards to entrepreneurship, it also shows you ways to bring in more, and like what Harrison said, like how do you use that privilege and whatnot to contribute back in a way. So since you guys did go through this journey and you have been, I think, working together in past many years, I'm going to ask the questions. One question that I love to ask all of my guest speakers, and it's usually at the beginning of the session, but today I decided to kind of keep it towards the end, which is across the board, any experience. It can be your personal finance, it can be your business. What is the biggest money mistake that each one of you have made? And what did you learn from it? How did you overcome it? Because I think everyone will screw up when it comes to money at least once. Who
Hmm.
wants to get on the chopping block first?
Let me think.
I already know what I'm gonna say.
Okay, go, Harrison. Go on.
Okay, I don't wanna be too incriminating, but when I was younger, I remember I was like 15.
I know this.
So, but okay, I'm sure everyone here. Okay, Mathura, do you know what what do you call it? CS:GO, Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
Yeah.
So I was quite heavily invested into that game as a child. Actually, not really a child, as a teenager. So I was sensible to an extent lah. But what happened was that, like they have those like loot boxes, loot crates. Some people say it's somewhat like gambling lah, because like you're essentially paying money and you're getting collectibles. But I would sink a lot of money into that because I thought like, there's a fair chance that I'll make it big. If I get a really expensive item, I can sell it on like the Steam game market and I'll get stuff. So I used to sink a lot of money into that. And of course, the house always wins. So I never really got anything worth. But I realized how much money I spent, and I realized that it was actually not really worth the time and effort I put into it. Yeah. So I guess in that sense, it was like never pays to gamble.
Yep. I think this is going to be one of the most relatable money
Yeah.
mistake that the people have heard, because even me, I did not do the loot boxes in CS:GO, but for me it was like, until now I'm playing a very boring cafe management game right now on my phone. I don't know why I'm doing that. It just keeps me entertained when I'm bored. But I'm so tempted to buy those additional coins and all those kind of stuff just for the sake of it. So I completely understand. I would want to make the mistake now. So it never stops. Sri, how about you?
Right. I don't think I can ever imagine doing that like with CS:GO because my parents were extremely strict with me and in spending money. So I never really spent a lot of money. But I think when I first got some income flow when I was in the army, I think that's one of the bigger mistakes I can imagine because I got money coming in, and then I was also free in my second year, so I had more freedom to decide what I want to do. And that's when I had a senior in the army who told me to invest in stocks and all that. And I was fresh to investing at this point, but instead of doing my own research and buying based on what you really think about the company and all that, I just went to buy based on brand name and what my friend recommended to me. So, because he's been investing for a while and he has a skill to, justify certain losses, and because he knows that he'll make it up from somewhere else, and he has quite a diversified portfolio. All these concepts, I had no idea what they were at the point when I started. So I just went gung ho, and whatever he told me, I just bought. And oh man, that was I lost thousands at that point. So it was a huge loss, and I remember I was devastated. I was telling myself, why did I do that? Never investing ever again. I'm just going to put all my money in my bank account and just let it just sit there. Nothing can happen. It cannot disappear, right? But again, that's also the other extreme where you're not taking any risk at all and you just let it die to, inflation, all that. So my relationship with money has been very complex. I think if when I was younger, if I had something on Money Matters, I would be very, very grateful because I had no guidance essentially. That's why I was able to do stupid things like this. But okay, we live and learn. So now I know what I can be more safe with, and my investments I actually do proper research before I commit to anything and all that. So there is that going for me at least. Yeah.
That's good. I completely understand. I think and it's a very understandable step as well, because like if you come from a background where they don't talk about investments and it's not something you've heard of, and then you meet a bunch of people who talk about it all the time, it seems so cool and fancy, and you just and like it's like, wow, your stuff, so I'm just gonna follow you. And then only when we get burned and we lose the money would we be like, I should have thought by myself.
Exactly.
Decision after my own research. Very, very relatable examples. I love that. To kind of wrap up the thing, I have one final question, which is, it could be with regards to, again, once again, your personal finance or your business, or maybe you guys can share one for each. What is one practice or habit or principle that you have with regards to money management that has helped you in your journey? So it can be one for your own personal finance management, one more for your business to kind of keep you guys going strong with regards to your business as well. Anybody wants to go first?
I think I can share a small tip that I do. One tip that I have is that, of course, to avoid tree situation as well. I think what I've been doing a lot recently is like I save a portion of my money, right? So whatever income streams you may have, you just save a small portion of it, and you put it into like ETFs mainly. So like if you're gonna hug a fund, and of course you won't lose as much. You won't get as high returns if you don't pick the right stock. But I believe that um, the market is it's really hard to beat the market if you're not an institution. So in general, from my exposure to different internships and people at the school I'm at, which is a very big finance school, most of the time the retail investor loses. So I would say that rather than take the gamble, just hug the fund. Other than that, I would say in terms of business wise, something we do is be very prudent with our spending. Definitely, I think we don't want to spend on something unnecessary, but yet at the same time, when we see that there's something worth it, like for example, the products that we deliver to schools, we are willing to spend a bit more if it means delivering a higher quality service. But of course, we'll stinge in other areas that are not as relevant. Yeah, so I think saving here and there really goes a long way. Yeah.
I'm just gonna like add on a question to that. When you say there are some things that are not so relevant and you can stinge on that, what were the things that you would consider as things you can save on?
So I would say like maybe even like company retreat, company dinner. Usually we take out like we pay our own pocket lah. So like Sri and I will like host at our house. We're not gonna charge it to the company card. Reason being, of course, like is not something that's crucial to the business. Something that we can pay from our own pockets. It's not something big. It's also like form of like a token of appreciation. So maybe if it's like a small like token that we want to give to our team members as well, it's of course not going to be something charged.
I mean, that really throws me back to one of my biggest mistakes. When I first kind of had more income in my business, the first thing I did, like, let's do a dinner with everybody and celebrate the work we have done. I completely understand that's the last thing you should be spending on. Focus on the sustainability of the business first. But doing it out of your own pocket, I think that is open anytime because that's your own decision and your own funds. Sri, how about you?
Yeah. I think whatever Harrison said, especially for the company, is very true. We need to be very prudent in the way we spend. But what I think has changed for us over the period of time is that right now we are pivoting to more data-driven decisions. And I think that's really the way to go for anything. Early days, we were doing a lot of things based on gut feeling and so on. But for example, simple things like, let's say, cutting costs on where you see it's not so necessary. Let's look at simple things like, let's say you have a certain auxiliary service for your company. At the start, the initial thought is always you don't want to spend money. You always want to keep money with you. And that means you try and do everything in-house. You try and get your own people to learn everything and then do it. Because on paper, it feels like, okay, you're doing everything for much cheaper. But you think about the time that goes into it and all that. You realize in the long run, you're actually spending more by asking your guys who are not as well-versed with certain things to do it in-house. Then if you were to just spend outside and ask them to do it, and then let's say they get it done in 1 hour as opposed to 10 hours in-house. So these cost calculations come into play because of the fact that you have data to work with. At the start, we did not have that. But now, since we have metrics and all this, we can make decisions accordingly. And again, moving forward, we also invest heavily on trying to collect more data on how exactly things are going on, because then we can adjust our programs and so on. And in addition, in a different way, in a different monetization model, these data can also in a way be monetized in terms of how you pitch your sponsors or what kind of people you have reached to and all this. So I would really say for any company, data-driven decision making is the way to go, even for finances. And that's something that I would highly recommend. And for on a personal front, again, like I said, I grew up really not spending a lot. Then I grew up a bit more, then I spent too much. So now I think I'm like in the middle ground where it's a balance between saving, but also not losing out on certain experiences, because in the end of the day, you're still young, you're in your 20s. You don't want to look back and feel like, oh, I didn't spend, and so my life is not as enriched as it should be, and so on. So a lot of budgeting, a very heavy budgeting takes place, in the sense that you really sit down and you talk to yourself and justify the cost that you make. But if, let's say, once you have justified the cost, you really go with it. So if, let's say, I want to travel with friends to this particular place, and I can justify that this is going to make my life better. I mean, because life is not all about just, living the bare minimum, right?
Yep.
So if I can justify that, and then I can extract value from it, and I really believe that the experience I'll gain from this is worth the money, then I'll go with it. But again, that decision needs to be consciously made, rather than just on an impulse. Just I go there, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just splurge money. So this thought process back in the back end really helps in making sure that you have a cash flow, but you're also not losing out on anything because you're trying to save at every single opportunity that you have.
Very nice, very nicely shared. I like all the things. I think I'm going to note it down myself and make decisions in my business. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for taking your time. We are pretty much at the end of our time. Any last words to our audiences as we end today's show?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that regardless of wherever you are in life, how old you are as well, just do not be afraid to make a change, because you really don't know what you can do with whatever you're given. So don't be afraid to take the first step, because it's really important. And once you start with the first step, the next few steps come much easier. So if you have an idea, go and pursue it. And you're never too young to actually have a great positive change. I think that's something we learned, both Sri and I.
Yeah. And I genuinely feel that at the start, it can be very scary and daunting. But one good thing that I've really started realizing now, there's a lot of people who are really rooting for your success in terms of adults and so on, be it your well-wishers or mentor or supporters. A lot of people really are invested in your success as well, because there's a lot of great things that we need to do in this world. So keep pushing, keep aspiring, and we'll get all of this done.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much, Harrison and Sri, for coming on board Money Matters and sharing your experiences. Of course, I think I can talk to you guys for hours and listen to all the amazing experience you have. But for now, this is a great start. So really, really appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and stay tuned for our next episode. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.